What's up guys, it's Kristen here today to talk about the worst books that I read in 2016. In my previous video I talked about the best books that I had read in 2016 and you can check that out with the link right there. But of course, there needs to be balance in the world. I know a lot of people are doing more like disappointing reads and that is just a whole other list. The only disclaimer that I will give is that I did DNF most of these books. Maybe some people might think that you can't properly judge a book until you've read it in its entirety, but my kind of general rule for DNFing is that I try to make it to the halfway point. And if by that point I am not interested in the story and I don't like the writing and I don't like the characters and I don't see what could possibly redeem it, so I would rather not waste my time on a book that I'm not enjoying when I could otherwise be spending that on an amazing book. With all that being said, let's get started. And the first book was actually one that I read near the very beginning of the year. It was The Furies of Calderon, the first book in Jim Butcher's Codex Alera series. First off, I've heard a lot of people who love this series say that the first book is the worst in the series and that you just have to make it past that. Being a huge fantasy fan myself, I understand that the first book bears the brunt of the world building and so in that case kind of sacrifices plot and character development. But that being said, it still has to be good, especially when I have to read over 600 pages. Other than it being quite boring at many points, my biggest problem was with its depiction of the female characters. The author does not miss an opportunity to describe the physical attributes of every female character, from the roundness of their hips and the swell of their breasts or lack thereof. Also possibly the longest battle scene in any book that I have ever read. Felt like it went on for about 400,000 effing pages. Next up is one that I'm sure most people will probably be pretty surprised, and I was surprised myself because it was one of my most anticipated reads of the year, and it was Dracula, the audiobook. Notice how I am placing emphasis on the audiobook, because I really don't know if I would have felt differently in this case if I had have read a physical copy of it. My anger towards the audiobook was really fueling my hatred for the book itself. The cover of the audiobook, Tim Curry is listed as the second to top billing, and that is what I came to this audiobook for. I wanted to hear Tim Curry reading Dracula. More than halfway through this 15 or 16 hour audiobook, he had probably been in it for about 7 or 8 minutes. This type of false advertising just really gets to me, and I was so convinced that I somehow had bought the wrong audiobook for the first 3 hours or so that he never showed up. Also, the woman who narrates Lucy Westenra's character, like, just no. No human being actually talks that way. With all that being said, I don't think I was ever gonna fall in love with Dracula. Because this was the beginning of the vampire genre, everything seems so tropey and predictable, which is of course not the book's fault. Next up, the one non-fiction book on this list, it is The Almost Nearly Perfect People, Behind the Myth of the Scandinavian Utopia by Michael Booth. The author is British, but his wife is Danish, and when they got married, they then moved to Denmark. This is supposed to be his sort of expose on what it's really like in Scandinavia, and don't believe all the hype about the happiest people in the world and the best medical care and the best education system. I am all for that. I wanted to read about a more nuanced and get a more complete view of the countries. But this just felt like a gross exaggeration. He's basically saying, you know, you might as well just move to North Korea because these are almost some of the worst countries in the world. I did discuss this with my friend Marie Berg, who is a Danish booktuber, and she had a lot to say about this and refuted many of the things that he was saying. Granted, that could be her personal experience and her feelings on things, but this also felt like a massively biased piece of work. And to top everything off, it says in the beginning that the author lives in Denmark still with his wife and 2 sons. Next up is a massively popular YA book and series in general that even people who don't love YA seem to love, so I am in the very small minority. And this book was Cinder by Marissa Meyer. Are we done with retellings yet? please? It's like when you hear a great song and the first 10 times you'll love it, but then it blows up and it's everywhere and you can't escape it. And I feel like this trend in YA is just really starting to get played out. But Cinder and I did not click from the very start, even though I did actually finish this one because it was a pretty quick, easy read. But all of the characters I honestly just forgot the minute that I put down the book. But my biggest gripe with it was that there was supposed to be this big reveal at the end, even though it is made crystal clear to the reader from just about the very beginning. I don't know if the author was using that as a literary device where the reader was in on something that the main character wasn't, or if she genuinely just underestimates the reader's intelligence. And last but not least, I have debated putting this one as the worst book of the year, but it is the one that I read the least of, so in this case I really do have a hard time accurately critiquing it. So glad that I waited for the library copy to come in of this because I was this close to being duped by a beautiful cover once again. It was The Nest by Cynthia Dupree Sweeney. Last I checked, this one has amazing ratings on Goodreads, so I don't know what it is that I was missing or seeing that everybody else isn't. But the reason that I would classify this one as the worst book is because I have never DNF'd a book this fast in my life. I only got a little over 20 pages into it, and I just had an immediate hatred for the writing style, which I was so convinced right away that I had somehow gotten hold of like a first draft rough manuscript of the novel. But then the characters, who I can't even classify as caricatures of people, because that would be too generous for this book. These are not even human beings. But I do feel like the film adaptation of this might actually work out, because in my experience, books that I hate, I often end up loving the film. So that is it for the worst books that I read in 2016, and I think there was only 5 or 6 books on that list, so percentage-wise, not terrible. But of course, I would love to hear what books you hated on the most in 2016. Let's dish down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!